If you set some gamers down in a room and ask them to name a series that follows a set formula, a title that will most assuredly come up is Mega Man. When you play a Blue Boy game, you know he's gonna journey through 8 Robot Master levels in any order you want, copy their weapons, siege Dr. Wily's 4-stage castle while making use of all your weapons, refight all 8 Robot Masters, end Wily's newest scheme, and watch an old man beg for mercy. For the most part, this is what you get, and due to that, a majority of Mega Man games have required a unique method to prolong game time. Following the original formula meant 12 levels, and most people when buying a sequel, especially back in the 80s and 90s, usually expected more from the predecessor. And then devs also thought you should make something 800% different for sequels in the 80s, but thankfully, Mega Man never Zelda 2'd us. Anyways, this got me thinking, how many Mega Man games actually follow this formula 100%? What are the unique ways they extend themselves if they do? And also, what methods worked the best? Now, I'm not going to spend too long explaining what I'm talking about today because I think it's pretty clear. Just know that I'm only talking about the numbered classic console entries. I want to focus on the minute ways in which each entry works with this format. I even originally planned to write about the X series too, but that topic becomes way too broad once we reach X5. Thankfully, I made the decision to cut the X games before replaying X7 and save myself some sanity. I'm also specifying console entries so I don't have to replay Mega Man in base. Even if I'm not talking about it, I already replayed X6 recently and yeah, I'm not touching N base now. Anyways, while this may be about the change in length of each game, it's important to note that a vast majority of Mega Man entries come close to the same. Accounting for stage number, stage length, and difficulty, most classic games run about 2 to 3 hours. And if you have minimal deaths and go in the optimal order, then you can look at something more in the 45 to 90 minute range. A pretty drastic cut cause yeah, experience and skill with Mega Man has a pretty big influence on your time. For example, I'm well experienced with the series, so even the specific entries I don't know well, I'm still mostly alright at, and have either the full orders or half of each orders memorized. I guess the best example is that with Mega Man 4, a game I've played often with one of the higher level counts, I spent 2 hours including a long bathroom break, while Mega Man 9, the 8-bit game I've played the second least with less stages than 4, also took me 2 hours with no shitting time. Because of that, this video is partially subjective. I wasn't going to replay all 11 games 5 times each just to give a good answer, especially when difficulty is actually a very important factor to a few of these. Because of that, I'll make sure to mention my expertise in each entry if I think it's relevant to the conversation. And at this moment, I'm going to put a reference sheet on screen that lists each of the mainline classic games by how many times I've roughly played them, plus my final time on it. Not an exact amount of which one I've played the most, it's been over 20 years since I first played some of them, so I can't be too certain. So the easiest way for us to start is by talking about individual stage number in each Mega Man game. Out of the way first, there are always 8 Robot Masters in every classic game except Mega Man 1, which only had 6. And it's this standard number of 8 across the board that's caused the need for a few weird ways to extend game time. Upping that amount from 6 to 8 in Mega Man 2 was kind of an easy one, yet going from 8 to 10 never happened. I've never heard or read an official reason, but I'm guessing it's a combination of a few factors like NES limitations, overcrowding your weapon list, confusing players for weakness order, and maybe something as simple as 8 heads around Mega Man looks the coolest. And so the stage number grew in other ways. In fact, Mega Man 2 even changed the Wily Castle stage count to 6, but only kind of. Stage 5 is purely boss rush and Wily's first phase, while stage 6 is only Wily's final alien phase, so it's tough to say that's 2 full levels. And even then, Wily 3 is pretty short, so overall the castle isn't much longer than Mega Man 1. Now where the stage number conversation gets spicy is Mega Man 3. Mega Man 3 still has 8 Robot Masters and 6 Wily stages, the exact same as Mega Man 2. However, Mega Man 3 added what I think was the worst way to extend game time, the Doc Robot stages. Once you're done with the 8 Robot Masters, you have to revisit 4 levels you've already been to with slight alterations and 2 new bosses each. The 8 bosses are called the Doc Robots. They have the patterns of the Mega Man 2 Robot Masters with very minor changes that make them kind of... First thing, one Mega Man 2 boss is at the midway point, and one is at the very end. What this means is that the only checkpoint in each stage is right after the first Robot Master and right before the second one. Meaning if you die to any of the first ones, you go back to the start of the level, which grows aggravating since the first half of almost all 4 of these stages, quite frankly, suck. For example, at the Redux of Shadow Man stage, you have walls of spikes covering everything, which are at least kinda easy to dodge. Following that, there's a dark room with these platforms that can drop you into a bottomless pit. Also not too bad for those experienced, but it has some tight timing if you're new to the game. It's pretty likely you'll lose at least one life on the way to the boss, who happens to be Woodman, a fight with an RNG factor that makes some of his hits potentially undodgeable. So if you die to one of those, back to do the whole other part again. And after that, a pretty short section before the second boss, covered with bottomless pits. And Shadow Man's is probably the easiest Doc Robot stage. To make it worse, on all of these, once you reach every boss, you're likely going to spend the first little bit trying to figure out their weakness from all 8 you have. Sure, you can debate that happens in the normal game, but at that time you have less than 8 during any Robot Master fight, and very seldom does a weapon deal super effective damage on more than one Robot Master. So if you already used Magnet Missile on Hardman, you're not going to attempt using it on Snake Man until after everything else. At the Doc Robots, you just gotta throw everything out until you find a weakness. And since you don't have a checkpoint at the first one, you can't be sacrificing that much time. In their defense, the Doc Robots have 2 weaknesses each, but you can still go through 6 before finding those weaknesses. And what makes them all even worse, it's still just harder versions of levels you already played with bosses from Mega Man 2. Now I don't want to be all bad, so if I had to say one kinda cool thing, these stages do give you a mandatory time to make use of the Rush Jet and Rush Marine transformations. Cool new mobility options based on Frenda's transformations from the anime series Shinzo Ningen Kashan. And hey look, there's a link to the best video I ever made that no one watched. What if y'all clicked on that? There's one part in Gemini Man stage where you use Marine to get past water, and another in Spike Man's level where you use the Rush Jet to fly past a very long bottomless pit. A pit where if you run out of Rush Jet energy or die, your options are long grind or game over. I think that's enough on the Doc Robot stages though. Let's move on over to Mega Man 4. MM4 started a new format that 5 and 6 followed, so we can talk about them all at once. You have the first 8 Robot Masters, followed by a 4-stage castle belonging to the fake villain of the game, i.e. Proto Man, Mr. X, and Comrade Cossack, and then Wily's castle after that, with 2 normal stages and 2 stages that are just boss rush and final Wily fights, meaning that Mega Man 4 through 6 have 14 stages plus boss rushes in each. Technically less than Mega Man 3, but what they do with them is better in my opinion. Every stage is wholly original with unique backgrounds and bosses, allowing them to be catered to the mechanics of each entry's late game, rather than trying to retrofit Mega Man 2 bosses into 3 or changing an early game area into a late game area to varying degrees of success. For example, Rush Marine was awkwardly forced into Gemini Man stage, while Rush Jet Adapter naturally flows into many sections of Mr. X's castle. I think for the original NES games, when they're working with a limited amount of data that force them to make levels of a very specific length, this double castle deal was likely the best, most creative way they could go about it. But I do have one little issue. Doing this 3 times in a row was a bit much. Yeah, all in all, this is more of a heavy air quotes story issue rather than anything else, and I'll talk about it one day in a true classic Mega Man retrospective, but presenting the exact same scenario with the exact same story beats wasn't really the way to go here. Besides the castle screen, there's no true difference between being in Castle 1 and Castle 2, so I think they could have done something else. For example, have a long trek through the mountain underneath Wily's castle rather than the fake Proto Man's Proto Man head fortress. At the very least, the classic series with its funny Saturday morning action block atmosphere lampshaded the ridiculousness in Mega Man 6, so it's not like I lose sleep over this. Moving on, after Mega Man 6, they never do the dual castle again, and almost always, the castle is 4 stages across the classic series. The only exception is Mega Man 10 that puts the final Wily phase in his own stage. Now, what becomes commonplace starting with X1 and moves into the classic series is the intro stage. These acted as a great way to introduce the player to what they'd see going forward, especially in the story department. You typically meet the new game-specific rival here like Vile, Base, Colonel, Duo, etc. They're pretty short, easy, and genius tutorial stages with a short hallway followed by a very easy boss. Great ways to start you off in the game, as opposed to a menu like before. From a game length point of view, since that's the video, they aren't very intrusive, which actually is what's so good about them. Besides Classic 8 and X8, there's nothing to find in an intro stage, so you just want to get from point A to point B without much thinking. They're set up to put you on your feet and then get to the 8 Robot Masters. A very great addition in my book, and I kinda wish wish they were back in 11. Conversely, I'm not a fan of the middle stages too much. Specifically in the Classic and X series, in Zero I like them, but as I said, that's outside of today's subject. So while the middle stage first appeared in Mega Man 7 for the mainline entries, its very first appearance was sort of evolved over the course of the Game Boy games. While in Western territories they are called Mega Man with Roman numerals, they're called the Rockman World Series in Japan, so for conversation's sake, I'm going to call them Mega Man World. Mega Man World 1 through 4 did this weird thing where it would still have 8 Robot Masters total, but half from one game and half from the following. So World 2 starts you off against 4 Mega Man 2 bosses, then after the midway cutscene, you get 4 stages and bosses from Mega Man 3. Mega Man World 3 and 4 do the same thing, while World 1 is just a simple boss rush for the second half, and World 5 is a totally original game. Now, after the initial set, some kind of event occurs. In World 1, you get a ludicrously difficult stage followed by all 4 Mega Man 2 bosses, and then one more boss fight that can trick you if you don't know the pattern, which you have to do all in one continue, a lot harder done than said. But that does mean stage-wise it's just this and one more, so you can debate if it's actually a midway level. World 2 then upgraded it. What would have been that long stage is a simple cutscene followed by full levels. I think you also need to beat all 4 of these on one continue, but World 2 is so easy that it's not really a problem. World 3 is what introduces what will become standard for midpoint levels. After the first 4 Robot Masters, Mega Man goes to a new level, passes by a very simple platforming challenge, fights a fairly easy battle, and then gets the second set of bosses. World 4 and 5, Mega Man 7, and Mega Man 8 follow this exactly. In fact, Mega Man 8 used it even better as the first 4 Robot Master weapons are utilized throughout the following 4 stages. Most commonly, the Thunderclaw's grappling hook properties and Tornado Hold's pushy thingy upwards ability. And Mega Man 7 does have a little bit of a cut between the two halves, but I wish it could have done better. The main distinguishing feature between the first and second set is how the Rush Super Adapter parts are in the first half. A very useful item you want as soon as possible. Either way, middle stages and intro stages stopped appearing by Mega Man 9. 9 through 11 are just the 8 Robot Masters and the 4 Wily levels again. Nice and clean, while all the original bits are jammed into the stage design itself. Everyone knows that one of Mega Man's most unique traits for side-scrollers of the time was how you could pick what stage to try next. And what was even cooler than that is how that might impact your overall game time. Mega Man 1 specifically had the basics of, oh man, this weapon sure is cool, I want that one. So you had to weigh out which one was the best. It's the Thunder Beam. In Mega Man 1, you want the Thunder Beam as fast as possible, but that has its own issues. If you start the game at Elec Man's level, you'll actually need to play it twice. See, there's an item called the Magnet Beam here that's needed to beat the game, and you can only get it if you have Elec Man's or Guts Man's weapon. So alright, just go fight Guts Man first. But oh shit, Guts Man is pretty hard for noobs. So now you're getting Bomb Man's weapon. And oh shit, Elec Man is tough for everyone, meaning you also need Cut Man's weapon to beat him. See what's here? Getting the best weapon to make stages easy and playing the stages only one time is made very hard. You need to earn the ability to mow through the rest of the game with the Thunder Beam and skip these platforms and Iceman stage by planning out a specific route. And keep in mind, it's still possible to go in any route you want. You're just also gonna need to practice more patience and careful button pressing. Another, perhaps more famous example of this is in Mega Man 2. Heat Man stage is hard. It has the famous disappearing block puzzles in it, and this is probably the most bullshit block puzzle in the series. But one thing you can do is skip over the whole thing with Item 2, which you get from Airman, who's weak to Woodman, who, you guessed it, is weak to Heat Man. So now you have a scenario. Do you weather the tough platforming challenge or fight these bosses Buster only? It's yet another wager you've got to make. Except for how Woodman is also weak to the Metal Blades, one of the easier items to get, and Airman is pathetically easy to beat with the Mega Buster. Ruins the point, but hey, you gotta admit they had something going here. There's also countless minor stage problems that a simple Robot Master weapon makes easier, such as Toadman's Screen Nuke dealing with the flying enemies at Pharaoh Man's stage, or Pump Man's shield trivializing some normally infuriating fire traps at Solar Man's level. In games that average at 2 hours, even if you're good at the game and a master at Buster usage, order will impact your playtime overall, making it important to mention. Moving on, stage length in classic Mega Man games doesn't change too much, or at least when looking at the same system. Talking NES games, if you run a stage without dying or maybe only one death, you are looking at about 5 to 7 minutes per stage. And if it's your first time playing one of the 8-bit games or first time in a while, then it'll likely take you an hour tops to beat the 8 Robot Masters. When it comes to actual land mass by stage, they don't vary too much on the NES. I found this one GameFAQs thread from forever ago where the user Zugelio measured each stage by screen to interesting results. First of all, a majority of Robot Master stages land in the 22 to 30 screen zone. Most of the ones above are from Mega Man 4 through 6, and most of the ones under that come from 1 through 3. And for reference on what that meant for me, on screen I'm putting up a list of how long each game's 8 Robot Master segment took me. As you'll notice, the only 8-bit game that ran longer than an hour was Mega Man 9, which, as I said, is one of the ones I'm least experienced with, and it's really hard. And then even despite my inadequacies, it came out to roughly 2 hours total, the same as my Mega Man 3 and 4 runs, in part due to the smaller level count. Now for the stages on that GameFAQs list that might be really low or really high, it's also important to note how within a game it might be made up for. For example, Gutsman's stage is really short, maybe 3 or 4 minutes if you're not dying, while Elecman's can go for about 8. And on top of that, Gutsman's stage is a very simple horizontal level with one tough section, while Elecman's is a tall vertical stage that goes on forever. And since it's vertical, if you get hit just once, you might be knocked down a significant portion, forcing you to redo a lot. Moving to later games, sometimes the lengths get padded through new stage-specific gimmicks. Many stages that would be short get lengthened by some sort of gimmick that makes you stop and think about things. Or perhaps most commonly, it's a large enemy blocking your path like the Penguins and Gemini's stage, or full-on sub-bosses like Kabonta Q or the Keeper. Like starting in Mega Man 7, they'd go crazy with mid-bosses, or maybe more specifically, scripted scenarios. Take Burstman stage for example. It has a mid-boss on its own, but also changing water levels that you need to wait for, because if you rush through, you end up touching spikes. And boy, Astro Man stage, that one is padded. Astro Man has a maze going on in his level, and once you know what to do, it takes less than 2 minutes. But if you haven't played Mega Man 8 in about maybe 7 years, just making stuff up, you might be here for 10. Speaking of Mega Man 8 gimmicks, let's talk about gameplay altering gimmicks. Starting back in Mega Man 5, you go through about half of Waveman's stage on a boat. It's essentially a horizontal shooter with less mobility. It's fine enough in Mega Man 5, spices it up, and results in Rush Marine's removal, which was always super situational. These auto-scrolling levels came back in Mega Man 8, and also frequently in the X series. In 8, it's 2 full-on shmup levels and 2 levels, meaning that Mega Man 8 has 4 of these sections total, more than any other game. The snowboard levels get a lot of flack from Mega Man fans, and honestly this was a part I wasn't looking forward to on the replay, yet I did it on my first go. And I'd say they last about the right length, roughly equal to a normal half stage. Same goes for the shmup part, except during the final shmup boss, which was mainly on me. I took a little too long because I forgot you can change weapons and the boss has a weakness, so I was just using the basic bullets to shoot him. Now for a gimmick that gave me actual trouble, let's look at Tornado Man stage. He's got these giant 3D glasses colored magnets that spin around when Mega Man's on top. You can only jump off at the perfect moment it wants you to, and I had some bad timing that day. Tornado Man stage took up about 10 minutes of my 2-hour Mega Man 9 run, more than any other level. Gimmicks like this, as well as mid-bosses, are strewn very frequently about Mega Man 9. Actually, Mega Man 9, 10, and 11 are just straight up gauntlet levels sometimes, especially 11. Now to be clear, since 11 is the newest game in the series by a wide margin, it came out after I was already a busy adult, meaning I have the least experience with 11 out of the whole classic series. I love the game and was glad to come back to it, but hot damn do I need to practice this one. Even without my lack of experience, these stages are long. Impact Man stage, where I only died once, took me the least time at 8 minutes. Bounce Man's, which I died at a few times, took 9, and Torch Man's, where I was a total total fuck up took me about 30 minutes. Yeah, it's been a bit since I played 11. On a good run, each level should run you about 8, but these are hard as hell, and 11 is not generous with the checkpoints. Like most classic games, 11 has 1 checkpoint per stage, but since this is a newer game with longer levels, that means you might be redoing a lot at once. It might have been 7 screens to the checkpoint in an old game, while here in 11, it might be more like 11 screens. For experienced Mega Man players looking for a challenge, it's an interesting tactic, though I'm not sure if it's one done on purpose. And we should stress here that I played 10 other gearless Mega Man games right before it, so often I'd forget about the double gear system that makes most of the hardest challenges manageable. Which might be how you notice difficulty is turbo important for a Mega Man game's length, and I think as a final example, we gotta look at Mega Man 7. For the most part, Mega Man 7 is pretty easy. Robot Masters don't take a whole lot of work, and once you have the Super Adapter, you can get through stages way easier. Because of this, I reached the final boss at the 2 hours and 10 minute mark. Not much more than the Mega Man 3, 4, 9, and 10 runs, which were all just under 2 hours each. And my run of 7 also had about an extra 30 minutes added since I couldn't remember where a few of the hidden items were. A concept I've skipped because it would have been more relevant if I were still talking about the X and 0 series. So already if I had optimized this, I would have been at probably 1 hour and 50 minutes. Still not a fantastic time for Mega Man 7 since I died a lot, but I'm looking for averages, it doesn't really matter. Now if you go back to the start of the video, you may recall I wrote that Mega Man 7 took me 3 hours. So where did this other 50 minutes go? Wily Capsule 7. Ask anyone what the hardest Wily fight is, and they'll likely say this. Like when Mega Man 7 was in development, the team were designing the final boss, and Keiji Inafune basically said, what if we make Wily turbo hard? And thus we have some real bullshit here. Wily 7 just has 2 attacks. He throws out 4 elemental balls that follow you, and electrocutes the floor. Sounds simple enough, yet dodging both of these at once is a real bitch. And if you get hit by the fire or ice elemental balls, you freeze for a moment, meaning you get hit by the electric floor, costing you 1/4 of your health. So if this happens 4 times, then yeah, that's it. Wily additionally disappears and reappears between attacks anywhere on screen, making you guess where to hit, sometimes landing in a spot that's hard to hit and dodge his attack. And the best weapon to fight him, Slinky Da Vinci, will also need a weapon recharge tank to last the whole fight, meaning when you walk in to battle Wily, you need to have as many energy and weapon tanks as possible. And if you die after using a few too many of them, you'll have to leave the stage to recover and redo the 8-minute boss rush upon re-arrival. So yeah, I spent 50 minutes at Wily Capsule 7. A rough as hell battle, but it's totally worth it for the ending sequence. Anyways, that's honestly most of what I had to say with game length in classic Mega Man. It's just an interesting little topic given how little they can change between entries and even your own personal runs. And of course, there's other stuff like glitches you can throw into the conversation, but little Tommy, age 5, isn't gonna know what that stuff is. The basic gist of it is, they used to add more stages, but then that got old, so then they added more difficult gimmicks and mini-bosses, and that seemed to work. Plus, you can talk about item collection a little bit with Mega Man 7 and 8, but there's not much in the conversation if X isn't here. Anyways, I know this is even shorter than last time, but don't worry, next month's video, I'm going back to a long project, and it's something I've been requested a lot for, so stay tuned for that.